Well, good day. We're sitting here with Jim and Joe Halbeisen. We just kind of wanted to, while we had them together here, oddly enough, Jim Halbeisen and myself, being some of the older people in the company, we do not have any recollection of Doc Teagens, and Joe does. Joe's a few years older than Jim. I don't know how many. Would you like to reveal that?
10.
For 10
No,
years?
9.5. 9.5.
Okay. All right. We got that contentious argument out of the way. Yeah. Very good. But Joe, do you remember when you actually first met Doc Teagens?
Not when I first met him. I was around him when Dad would go over there and talk with him. I can't really give you a whole lot of recollection because I was too young to understand who I was really talking with. But I do remember him talking, and he was easy to understand. He talked to you like he was your equal. Not that he knew a whole lot more than you, but he did. So I guess basically that's about all I can say about Doc. I remember him.
Were you
chuckling.
still in high school at that time?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that'd be late 50s. He
Late
graduated
50s.
from high school in 60.
60, yeah. So it would have been late 50s.
The company had just come into existence, basically.
Yeah. I can remember hauling lime for Doc. Dad had a lime hauling business. He had got hauled lime on the Olena farm. And I can remember him being out there watching me spread the lime, and he'd just ask him things and he'd kind of chuckle and give me an answer. Like I said, I wasn't smart enough to sit him down and say, what do I need to know? So, but he was just an easygoing man, as I remember.
That's pretty typical, though, of all our reps that knew him. They were fiercely loyal to him because of his commonality.
Yeah.
He wasn't braggy or boisterous, or he just was very, like Joe said, a common guy. And guys really, they loved that about him.
So, gentlemen, history of lime. Let's talk about that on this farm. Joe, can you remember when you guys first started hauling lime here? Your dad had a lime hauling business. You would have been a teenager. You'd been hauling lime previously to meeting Doc Teagens? Or?
No.
Okay.
No. I can remember him spreading lime out of bags out of a trailer applicator, and he put 500 pounds the acre on. I thought, and then Doc Teagens come along and says, no, you might need 5 tons. So.
And then did he get it from like over here, like a Parkertown would have been a high magnesium? Was that the type of lime he was putting on at the time?
Parkertown was the high calcium one.
Okay.
There was a high mag one east, but at that point in time, Parkertown had the high calcium, and that's where the lime came from. At one point in time, we put lime on when we planted through the dry fertilizer box. We went to Spore down by north of Bucyrus, Spore quarries, because that was up close to 30% calcium, and it was dry in bags. I can remember spreading the lime, and then just the hose just dribbled the lime on top of the row.
So your dad had to kind of comprehend that putting on more would be beneficial and quite a bit more than what would been typically done back then. So I assume that he put on some strips or something, or when was that aha moment and really got your dad engaged? Do you happen to remember that?
You got to remember, I was in high school. I was paying attention to other things. All I know is it must have worked because we started putting lime on everything. So to give you an example of him putting in strips, I can't do that.
So you guys also rented acres. So did you put lime on that, or did you have a contrast to where you had the calcium on or didn't in the acres that you farmed back then?
No, I do not remember putting lime on the rented acres.
Yeah, that's always a challenge for the farmer.
Yeah.
If he can rent that, a lot of our ground was year to year, and we felt that was risky business other than going with a very light rate. And some guys, if they can lock it in for 5 years, they'll put it on initially and try to gain that back in the 5-year period. So that rented land is always a challenge when they're not share renting, because again, most of the landlords are not looking to improve land. They're just trying to generate cash flow.
So what were your observations of the differences between where you had the lime and where you didn't when you're farming under your different methods? And what adjustments did you feel like you had to make?
More application, particularly nitrogen. I felt the rented farms, the amount of N we had to put on corn was always significantly higher to maintain the yield. We had to be careful with that because we were feeding all of it. So we had to be careful not to really overshoot the mark and get the corn out of condition. And that's always with livestock and using high cal, you've got to be a little careful with that so that you can boost that yield back up again, but you start getting the quality of the tissue change, and that can start to work in reverse for you as you're feeding it. So that's always a challenge.
I guess the other thing the difference that was noticed would be the soil tilt of the rented ground versus your own ground.
Yeah.
The tilt was always better, so you figured that the growing medium had to be better because the soil handled easier.
So in terms of marketing of your hogs, I mean, it wasn't done back in the 70s and 80s like it is today. Did your market notice the quality of the end product of your animals funneling through, and did the market notice your quality of your hogs being produced with feeds from this program?
I can't say specifically that they did, although they had a program where if you would sell 50 hogs at a time, they would do it on yield and grade, and we always got a premium for our hogs. To compare them to somebody else's, I couldn't do that. I was concerned that we were doing okay, and
We'll talk about the local butcher and that lady.
well, we used to sell to a local butcher. They'd buy 5-6 hogs a week, and then they would sell it in the local town. And one of the gals worked in there. She said to us, "I don't know what's different about your pork. It just lays better in the case than the pork that we get that we need the extra cuts of." So I would say that must be the quality showing up. We just couldn't specifically give her an answer as to why, but
Over the years, you've watched the neighborhood continue to use high amounts of various conventional fertilizers, and you've noticed maybe some differences in your crops and how they handle stress versus the neighbors. Would you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think it's late season dryness, particularly on corn. We're using, 60% of what they're using, but we get into the super dry weather of August, early September, and they'll start to fire up from the bottom. And a lot of people believe that it's maturing early, but when we start shelling corn, our corn's actually the same dryness or drier, but we never see that firing on the bottom like they do. It stays green, right to the soil level. And again, I believe calcium has a big part of that. I think the growers has a big part of that, invigorating that biological. And see, the biological has helped feed the plant, keeps it, actively growing during the stress period.
This test is from their corn. And basically, if you look here, you have a higher calcium ratio, and that's what Verdine pointed right out. She goes, you don't see calcium that high in corn. I don't know if you want to elaborate or talk about any of that. Or
Yeah, well, the energy factor we feel is, with these, she did the raw energy, and we're, 20, probably 30% higher than the competition. And see that calcium plays into that, in our opinion, because you start getting quality up into the tissue of the plant and its ability to trap sunlight. Farmers don't think about that. What's their job? What are you actually doing? You're growing bushels of carbohydrate. That's what's in that seed of corn. Even in the soybean, you've got a little bit more protein in there, but you're harvesting sunlight energy photosynthetically, forming a sugar, and then that's what you're reselling. And see, the chemical composition of sugar is C12H22O11, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. just doesn't take a lot of inorganic minerals to push that yield. Actually, the environmental research is showing that when you over-apply fertilizer elements, it accumulates in the tissue of the plant, and it doesn't necessarily reflect more yield.